Hey everyone, my name is Amber.
And I'm Jasma, and welcome to another episode of the Off the Charts podcast. This is the podcast where we speak with experienced artists and hear more about their journeys to get into where they are today.
On today's episode, we are super excited to be welcoming Kojo Owusu. Kojo is a former filmmaker and now finance director, which we're going to talk about, who holds a Bachelor of Arts in English and Theater from Michigan State University, as well as a Bachelor of Arts in Cinema and Media Studies from USC, which is absolutely fantastic.
And just to flex some of his film experience, he has worked as a development intern at Warner Bros. Entertainment, a talent manager at Novaland Media Film Production, and a freeform production management intern at the Walt Disney Company. And Kojo is also part of the USC's Dean's List upon his graduation, as well as having been named one of Forbes 30 under 30 scholars in 2018.
We just get the best guests, guys.
I know.
I don't know.
Anyone
I love
can
reading
get
off
the
the list.
30 Not to get 30 under 30, you know. That's
awesome. So since 2019, Kojo's focus has actually now shifted from the film industry to a more business perspective. He's been working as a regional manager of business development at Blackline in New York. And we're really excited for this episode because this is going to be a little bit of a different take on the arts than we've kind of always had. Yeah. A lot of our guests have, are doing their work in the arts and have talked a little bit more about their experiences, both negative and positive. But with Kojo, it's really interesting how he's able to weave all of his experience in film and now in a completely new industry and kind of hearing more about the realities of what it really is like being, a professional filmmaker and a professional artist.
Exactly.
So Kojo, how you doing? How's it going?
I'm great. Thank you so much. I'm just happy to be here, if I'm being real.
Happy to have you here.
There was a million things going through my head as y'all were giving the introduction. I'm like, damn, I don't know if I'm doing too much art these days, but no, yeah, I still consider myself like an artist though, and I carry that with me in whatever I do. So
absolutely, yeah. For those of you who were in attendance at our conference last year, our Off the Arts conference, Kojo was actually one of the panelists for our film and TV panel, as well as a mentor for some of our mentorship sessions. So you may recognize his face and a little bit of his story, but we're excited to kind of delve into it more today.
I can start anyway, so I'll let y'all decide.
Let's kick it off.
Let's start talking about how you got into film, because that is where you started within the industry. So, I mean, you attended USC, which is one of the best. It's the dream school for a lot of people. So how did you kind of end up there? What made you... Don't be humble here. We'll flex for you.
It is whatever. So for me... just a little bit of background. I grew up and I was born in Ghana, Africa, and most of my siblings, I have three other siblings, they could all speak English better than me. I was the one where, as I was picking up the Ghanaian language, I was moved here. And we speak, Ghana was colonized by the British, they called us slippin'. So like we speak English over there, but it's like I hadn't fully picked it up. So coming here, I would watch a lot of like television and literally imitate the characters. And so how that manifests itself was like me. Some of that really shaped the way I see stories. I remember Naruto, which is an anime, like probably one of the most popular animes out there. I would watch Naruto with subtitles and learn to read that way.
Wow.
So my entire experience as like how I came to film was really identifying with, I feel like a lot of people go through this, but like identifying with some of these characters, relying on some of these characters to express myself, if that makes any sense. So that's how I fell in love with film. And I didn't really seal the deal until like I watched The Dark Knight. It was I'd seen X-Men, I'd seen Spider-Man. I was like a big superhero person, like everybody is. But The Dark Knight was the first time where it felt real, where it's like, oh, like that feels like it's happened. Like in the city next door, that feels like it's Detroit right now. But it's like the big takeaway for me was, and I don't have the technical term for this because I threw it out of my mind, but I would just always for myself call it the ultimatum. Like every villain is like, do this or else. Or like if you don't do this, this city's gonna blow up. The same thing every single time. But The Dark Knight was the first time where it wasn't about that. I felt like they were just the Joker was running an experiment. And I'm not going to spoil it, but it's like, it's not about blowing this person. It's about seeing when you put people in a pressure cooker situation, what would they actually do? Because everybody likes to sit there and talk about, oh, I would do this or I'm about this, but then you put them in that position.
What are
What
they
would you?
really?
And that's
Yeah.
yeah, that's all the movie was about to me. Like when you put these people, yeah, whether it's Batman or like who are you actually going to decide? Like he has to choose between Rachel, the love of his life, and Harvey. Like who are you actually going to decide to choose? And that's when you see who someone really is. And there was a whole movie of that, and I was just blown away by that. I'm like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want. And at the time, I only saw actors, so like I didn't know about cinematographers. Like I don't understand any of that.
Right.
So I just thought I wanted to be an actor. And so I get into Michigan State, and we do a play where it was like Alice in Wonderland, but in an insane asylum. And I helped come up with the story. And through that, I realized I'm a better writer than I am like actor. So I decided to switch to screenwriting, and I didn't know anything about screenplays or nothing. I always wanted to go to USC. I thought I was too dumb to get in though. I had like a I had like confidence issues at the time. So I didn't think highly of myself enough to get in. So I always thought I'd transfer in, which was always the plan. I was going to transfer in, but I thought I'd transfer in as an actor. Now I'm transferring as a screenwriter, and just to keep it short, basically I spent. That's why I appreciate what I revere you two so much, and like really respect what you do. Because at the time when I was trying to transfer in, there wasn't anything like this. So there was just this thing called College Confidential. And so I would just read it all the time. I'd read that's all I would read.
Oh my god, that is my like third bookmark every single day.
Yeah.
That was our life for just 6 months.
Oh my gosh. Try 2 years for me. I would read it every single day, and I'd go back on because maybe it's changed, but there wasn't a lot of like film data points back then. So I would just I'd find whatever film's going. I'd just go back to like the latest entry, or the earliest entry ever, and just read it back. And then what I would do is there's this podcast by a USC alum, and so I think John August and Craig Mazin. John August, they're both screenwriters. Craig Mazin wrote Craig Mazin. Hey, shout out to you, Craig Mazin. If you ever hear this, I didn't know he had it in him. He wrote Chernobyl at one point. I'm like, damn, bro. This man wrote Hangover 2.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
I didn't know he had it in him. Man, shout out to Craig Mason. I was like, bro, this man can write. I didn't know.
Like, you remember watching this? Wow.
I was impressed. But, I mean, this is like a free tool. Like, I mean, now film is so ubiquitous, you can find any YouTuber, they can talk. But, like, if you want it from the source, like, script notes, go back the first episode, listen, and that's what I would listen to every single episode, and I would practice, and I would like go print screenplays from the MSU library. I would spend my weekends before this podcast started. Jasmine, Amber asked me, "What do I do?" And I'm like, I don't really do nothing on weekends. Like, and that's what I would do. Like, and it was a sacrifice. I don't want to like sugarcoat it. It was a sacrifice. Like, my dad always told me, like, anyone can do anything as long as you're willing to sacrifice for it. And that sacrifice can be time, like just straight up time. It could be like your mental health. It could, and I'm not telling you that these are good things to sacrifice, but I'm just saying, like, you can do whatever you want. If you want to be a mathematician, are you willing to sacrifice the time it's going to take for you to learn all those skills to go back to the basics? If you're not good at math right now, are you willing to go back to the basics and relearn all that and be quick? So for me, I knew I'd have to sacrifice a lot of time on my friends, mainly because I didn't know anything about film like that. I was a casual consumer. I had to learn like how to format a screenplay, what's a cinematographer, what is costume design. I mean, that one's self-explanatory, but anyways, like all of that. I have to figure all that out. So that was a lot of like lonely weekends. I thought it was fun because I was learning, but like objectively, it was lonely weekends.
Right.
Just watching movies and make like just learning and literally sitting in my going on walks by myself or just sitting in my room just listening to like script notes by myself. I would watch like commencement speeches from USC's like previous classes from like years past, like and because they'd be online, I'd watch it and cite specific things that our Dean Elizabeth M. Daly would say just to show them that I'm doing my research.
Wow.
Like, who's out here citing? Who's out here citing
That's the
commencement
one way you get
speeches
into
from?
university.
I know, dude.
Yeah,
I'm out here, bruh. I'm doing the research, bruh. And like, and I wasn't purposely trying to be different, but I was trying to be me. So like, I remember I asked a friend on my Common App. One of the questions was like, "Hey, like," I didn't go "Hey," but like they're like, they said, "What is the greatest invention?" And I wrote flour because like I love bread. And it was my colleague, my roommate was like, the wheel, the calculator, the iPhone. I'm like, you and everybody else, dude. You and everybody else are saying that shit. Like say something unique, you know.
Oh my God.
So I laid it all bare because I had the fundamental understanding that like,
Great.
when I had nothing to lose, I was already depressed. If I don't get in, I'll just live a depressed life. I had nothing to lose, so I just laid it all bare. Like I talked about being too black for white people and then too white for black people at that time. Like I talked about that in my essays. I talked about not fitting in at Michigan State. Like I talked about like moving to a different country and how tough that was, like learning the language and all that. I talked about like how I know this is my worth is tied to this. Like right now, I don't know anything else I'm good at, and I'm just trying to figure that out. I cited examples. There was this essay they talked about right about time you failed and overcame it, and I talked about a time I failed and didn't overcome it because that was my biggest failure, but I didn't overcome it. I'm still working on it. I talked about that. Like it was about challenging authority, and I just couldn't do it. Like I just laid it all bare because I knew if I can write in a particular way where I can tell a compelling story about myself, and just put my truth out there, and someone reads my application, they go on to the next one, and they're still thinking about me. I won. Like,
Right.
like that's how I saw it, and I buttoned it up to where I'm like, okay, I couldn't have done anything. I know deep down in my heart, I couldn't have done anything more. Like I put in the time, I did my best, and I ended up getting in, and like. I mean, that's a long way. It's about how I came to film, but like that truly is
Right.
like. But once you got in, that's another story.
That's another thing. Yeah, so that's a whole nother volume. Because one of the things that actually I really wanted to ask was that you mentioned not kind of learning experience by just self-studying and training yourself and doing it, which is what a lot of people do. And then you have the handful of people that have been making film since they were 5 and have a production company in high school and the same. So you get that a lot in the arts of people. It's kind of like different pockets of people. So and I'm assuming USC probably had a lot of those. So
a lot of the latter that you talked about.
Right.
Doing it for a while.
So how was it, going into this, feeling like you guys are still getting the same training, but some people were at different levels? Like, how did you kind of deal with that? Was that an obstacle for you? Because I know a lot of people probably worry about that or feel that when they're in those kinds of arts programs.
That's a genius question. Like, I really appreciate that question. I did compare, but like, I think it's human to compare.
Right.
That being said, I had this, like, something that helped me out of my depression in Michigan State was I came across this quote that said, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. So when I was like, that's what inspired me to even like just go full on in with USC, because it's like I was comparing myself to like I think Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, who at like 22 had won Oscars. I'm like, what am I doing? Like that's literally how I was thinking. And then you get to USC and like everybody's like done something before they even came here and like made a few things. Deep down I always knew like this is just my bad. This is just my lot. I came to this late. Like I didn't have the resources you had, so I have to navigate my story, and I have benefits that you don't have because of everything I've experienced just to get here. So yeah, it's very easy, and USC is very competitive in the sense that like everybody's doing something, so that's where you're comparing, but it's never, and I can't say never because like you can't tell someone how to feel, but like I always knew deep down like everybody had their story and how they got here, because the same way I'm there, someone's looking at me thinking, oh my gosh, how did you just even get in? I'm like, I don't know, right? Like, so
I
it's
mean,
like,
you put in the work because, like, it
yeah,
sounds
but
like you went all in when you wanted to, when you just
that's
chose this
fair.
is what you wanted to do. So you
Yeah,
deserve
but
it.
it's no, I appreciate it, but like that's the thing. It's very easy to look at somebody's looking at y'all and thinking, "Oh my gosh, they have a podcast. What am I?" You're like it never ends. So I always knew deep down that like it's easy to compare, but you shouldn't or try not to as much as
Right.
possible. So a real answer to that is my answer, but like I always want to chime in on the fact that like this is what changed a lot of it for me. At least for me, coming like from middle class, there's just there's just wealth there, and like you just see like you just exposed to like a different level of wealth that kind of changes your perspective on things.
Mm-hmm.
um and this person's this person's child and this person's that. I'm like, damn, okay. And with that, what tends to happen is like, at least for me, it's like you just see this is how I saw it in my mind, and this is its own conversation. Like, you see people that have ties to the industry. You see people with massive wealth, and they still are struggling to break in. And you start thinking like, oh, well, that's because they're trash. Like they just making that weak shit. It's easy to
I
think
love
that.
that you brought that up because it's so true. It's like it's the whole idea of like nepotism babies in
Nepotism,
Hollywood
yeah.
and
Right.
everything, and it's like it really doesn't make or break the actual quality of the work if you put it up against someone
Yeah,
blindly.
exactly. So it's like you have to, at least for me, what I ended up doing, and a lot of other factors fed into it. There's a lot more to it. It's not even so much the quality of the work. It's just the game's changing from underneath them, and they don't even see it yet. I think now we all see it.
Right.
Now you
We'll
have
get
like
into
people.
that.
Yeah, of course, that's its own thing. But it's like a lot of it is also like looking at other people and like assessing for myself, like, okay, they have all these resources and they still are having trouble. What do that means? I'm gonna have to do double, triple what they're doing just to even be at the same pace.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Right.
that's like how I saw it. That's how I was comparing myself. It's like, okay, just analyzing the playing field and how far back am I? And not in terms of like artistic quality, but it's like realistically, financially, what do I
Right.
need to do just to keep
Yeah.
up with them?
Yeah, and I think that's
Or
a
else you go in
really
massive debt.
that's a really strategic way, I think, to look at things because I think a lot of the times people just start, pointing the finger at themselves and like start self-deprecating once they see that
Yeah,
difference. So I think
you're
that's
right.
really interesting that it's a pretty healthy way to approach it, I feel like, and I think I'm glad you shared that. Before
Oh
we
yeah,
dive into the questions about your experience in the film industry, though, I want to backtrack real quick because I
of
think
course,
it
anything.
sounded like, once you decided that film was your thing, you kind of, you spend your time doing the research, you spend your time putting in the work. And it sounded like you did a lot of that on your own because like guidance, I guess, just wasn't available from people in the
Yeah.
industry. But did you have that sense of support from your family or your peers or just, I don't know, wherever you grew up? Was that a normal thing to kind of pursue a field like this? Or did you ever have doubts that was more of like an external pressure to choose something else or whatever that may be? Did you have to deal with things like that along the way?
Yeah, I had support from my parents, but historically, no, I had to like figure it out for myself. And you need to keep in mind, I come from like a factory town, like Taylor, Michigan, which is like 20 minutes south of Detroit. So like, this isn't a diss to the community at all. It's like it's one of those where most people graduate high school and go work at Ford or GM. There's some that end up going to UFM for gymnastics, right? And it's
Cool.
like to do that is like just to do that is like, excuse my language, but that's some crazy shit. Like, because that's just like our Midwestern
The
lifestyle. Like that's
norm.
just what it is.
Right.
Like, yeah, it's just the norm. So to say historically that, oh, you want to do film, like you'll get made fun of, like where I'm from. Like it's like
Right.
how? Because like everybody here just stays here. So and
Right.
you trying to do
Right.
that, you're trying to be different. That's just the vibe you're gonna get back, right?
Interesting.
So I was very guarded with it for a long time. I always expressed I was interested in acting at the time. It was acting, but like, um, I didn't share it too much. And even when I did, I was a bit nervous. People were like making fun of me, thinking like I had my own best friend at the time say like, "Oh, be realistic," trying to like when I told him I wanted to be an actor, right? So it's like that definitely didn't help the I'm that definitely didn't help confidence in going in. But I think coming from a Ghanaian household, like an immigrant household, it's like your parents sacrifice a lot, so the trade-off is that you're going to be some kind of doctor or a lawyer. In our
Right,
case,
right,
it was
right,
a
right.
doctor, right? But I went to Michigan State, and I wasn't happy on that path, that medical path. So I had a conversation. At first, I switched my major before telling them, but then I worked up the nerve to tell them, and
Right.
they're like, "Oh yeah, like, look, as long as you can take care of yourself and whatever family you have in the future, that's all we care about. As long as you're happy doing what you do." And
That's
so,
nice.
and I was actually shocked to hear that because my parents are like amazing, but I was shocked to hear that.
Right.
But yeah, so in that sense, I didn't really have a mentor per se, but I think mentors are important, but when you don't have access to that, I don't have a term for this, but you can have like maybe like a one-sided mentor. I felt like John August and Craig Mason were my mentors, even though I never met them. And I think the beauty of the time we've been born in, the internet age, is that like you can get information from anywhere. I would watch I don't watch them anymore, but the Hollywood roundtables. I would watch the Hollywood Reporter roundtables. I would
Right.
watch those. I've seen damn near every single. At the time, now I don't watch the actor ones anymore, but like I would watch every single one, and I'd learned from when I first started seeing a film as a business was when I think Bradley Gray, he was the president of Paramount. He went, okay, I think the interview was pretty rude, but they're like basically, I'm paraphrasing, but they go, the Transformers movies are trash. Why do you keep making them? And his response was, if I can give Michael Bay $200 million and he brings me back $1 billion, I'll do that every time because it funds the other stuff.
Preach.
And I was like,
Wow.
and up until that point, I didn't see it that way. I always thought, no, you have to make art at all costs. I'm like, oh, I never thought about it that way. That's a really good point. Like, you gotta fund the other
Right.
stuff. So the short answer is like, I never necessarily had support, but I never had a chip on my shoulder. Like, I had no mentors. Like, I never had it because like I felt like I'd learned from so many people just from watching interviews with them. Like learning from Lupita, she was the only dark-skinned person that I'd seen at the time. Like that was relatively close to my age in the media, and just like reading about her life and watching her in interviews and seeing how she carried herself.
I think
But yeah.
the takeaway for that is really there. As long as you know where to look, you can always find support and resources, and you just
Exactly.
kind of need to have that drive to do those things. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Let's get into the fun stuff. So
The tea.
Warner
As we
Bros.
like to call it.
Walt Disney.
Oh man.
What was that like?
Man, I specifically worked for Heyday Films, which does the Harry Potter movies, and I got there right around where like Harry Potter had ended. So
You say
a
that so
lot of
casually.
oh, that's just what it was. Like, this sounds messed up. Like, once you're in the cut for a little bit, and I wasn't even in the cut for that long. I pieced out like shortly after. But like, even before coming back to this podcast, I didn't want to come off as like someone that like wants to discourage anyone. I really,
Absolutely not.
yeah, I really don't
Absolutely.
want to discourage people for like. But for me, it's like. After a while, I'll give this short little story. There's a statue in the USC courtyard of Douglas Fairbanks, who was one of the founders of like the
Yes.
film industry. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, right. And I would look at that damn near every night for like 2 years, just like as inspiration to keep going. And I'd look at photos of that statue. And so then when I finally get to the campus, every night for a couple of months, I would go look at the statue before I went home. Before I left the campus, that'd be the last thing I saw. I'd look at the campus. I'd go and like I would literally joke. I'm like, me and my friend would be like, "All right, bye Douglas, bye Dougie," and then we'd leave the campus. And by year 3, I wasn't doing that anymore
Right.
because like it's just life, you know.
You
It's
get
like
used to
you get used to it. And it's not that you
Right.
don't appreciate it, but you just get
Right.
used to it. So like, your reaction of like, you say that so casually. I'm like, you just get used to it. There are a lot of people that work there, and then, you know, I'm sure it's cool having a podcast, but sometimes it's stressful, and so you're like, you know, like that's how it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
And
So
yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I don't Absolutely not. You're not coming off as, discouraging anybody. I think the reason why we wanted to have you on in the first place is because you offer that realistic perspective of having to switch paths after putting so much into one thing. And I think personally, that's like one of my biggest fears going into anything at all. It's like, what if it doesn't work out, then what? And I think the fact that you're doing so well even now after having switched multiple times your direction in life, that's what we wanted to hear. So don't worry about that at all. I think that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
Second that. Oh my gosh. So Harry Potter.
Yeah. So we get there and like Harry Potter just ended, so like it's at least for this at the time Heyday was contracted with Warner, but I think they might have switched to someone else. No, I think Fantastic Beasts, so they're still with Warner. They might not be on the lot right now. Yeah, I'm not gonna give that story for the sake of time, but it's like that was one where a friend helped me get it. Like a friend got me the interview.
Nice.
But yeah, so it's like connections. Y'all are building phenomenal connections already. Like you haven't even stepped foot on the campus yet. You're building great connections, So that's the way to do it, though. That's all it is. Yeah, we were just trying to figure out what was next after Harry Potter, and like they had Paddington Bear 2 was good, So they had like
fantastic. That was good. That was fantastic.
Exactly.
That was a work of art.
Yeah. So we were working on like. I was doing script coverage, so I would just read a crap ton of scripts and like recommend what would work. And then our big project was like, we had like a few movies that like didn't work out, and so we were doing like post-mortem, which is like after it's been released on that, like what could have been improved. And that led to a big project where we were spending a lot of time, like we were crunching box office data from like maybe 10, 20 years past, trying to figure out like literally, it was a big ass spreadsheet trying to like figure out what works, what works, and through that we would source information. Like so, that was a big chunk of our time trying to figure out like what was next after Harry Potter through this box office data. Like we did the fun stuff like give notes on Paddington Bear and all that stuff, and to give notes on like the Harry Potter movies. And sometimes you're not telling the full truth because you're afraid of like what they would think. Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, like it was unpaid, so like I was actually losing money. I would take 3 trains and an Uber just to get to the lot. So it's like it was rough, and all of that I wasn't gonna pay. They had good lunches though, so they paid for the lunches. That was nice. And this isn't a diss. This is just the nature of the beast. That's just how it is.
Right,
most internships are unpaid. I learned a lot from Warner Brothers in the sense of like, being around like celebrities. Like you kind of just get. Also, the school USC kind of exposes you to that, so it's just like, all right, whatever. But like being around like people you revere, people you admire, and like, oh, that director's walking by. Like Christopher Nolan opened freaking door for me, and I should have just told them, "You're the greatest of all time," but I didn't say anything.
Sorry, we need to backtrack. So Christopher Nolan opened the door for you?
Yeah, I didn't say anything.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
well, I was leaving. He's like had the door open for me, but like, and Syncope, his company, was down the hall from us. I'd thought about several times just going down that hall and like walking in. Those crazy Hollywood stories. I just walked in there and I thought about like doing that several times, but I'm like, nah, bruh, I'm not trying to get fired, even though I'm not technically an employee. Yeah. I'm not trying to go from not being paid to not being paid and not being able to step on the campus. The bulk of what I did though at Warner Brothers was statistically looking through box office to project what would be the next thing, and ultimately I said they should look into adapting anime into like sourcing stories, not so much adapting it one-to-one, but getting ideas from anime. And then so for example, like he claims he didn't do it, but we all know Christopher Nolan watched Paprika and then put
Inception, right? Yep.
Yeah, right. Like it's so similar. Except he put a crime twist, and he shouldn't be ashamed of that. Like you should admit to that. Like Paprika is great. Like you just put a crime. You're inspired. Yeah, exactly. Right. There's no way. You thought it out originally, and it's all this other stuff, and it's the same plot. Like come on. So it's like to me, my big idea for I Left was just get the concepts. You don't have to adapt it. Just get the concept and adapt it into a new genre, like live action. you know. So like you don't need to do a 1-to-1 Death Note because that might not look good. You might not want to have the Shinigami like all that stuff, but like you can take that concept, that idea, that mystery aspect, and like adapt it to something. That was like the big project I worked on there. Yeah.
Wow. And actually, can I ask, because you were kind of in that realm of seeing all these projects come actually from literal scratch to starting to, you know, potentially get made, what would you say is the hardest part of that? Is it in the development of like finding the idea? Is it in funding it? Like, how does that kind of, from what you saw and during your time in all these internships, how does that whole process work?
That's a good point. The hardest part, for at least that I saw, and if I was still in the film industry, I'd want to be just development. Like I have no interest in like, this sounds like film sacrilege, but I have no interest in being on set and like that. Just
Interesting.
yeah.
But that's actually like the most exciting part of like, if you think making a movie, it's like seeing it all come together. At least for me, like I just think that's where the fun happens. No,
it is, but like for me, unless this is just me, like unless like either I am an actor, I am a director, I am like a cinematographer or something in principle where like you're always in action. I think in my experience, there's a lot of inaction. There's a lot of sitting there moving sand, waiting for the shot to be set up.
Right.
There's a lot of moving sandbags around. There's a lot of like spending 30 minutes just setting up a shot just to shoot it for like 5 minutes. And like I know that's the practical applications of making a film, but for me, the way my mind works, like that's like too much wasted time for me. I need to like we need to be doing something.
Doing it, right.
Yeah, and because then I'll just start thinking about like all the other things I need to do. That's just how I am, unless I'm like an actor or something. So what I liked about development was that like there's a million ways to crack a story, and once you find that story, there's a million ways. Like the writer will go write it, then you bring it back, and we all have to dissect it, and like that's what I loved. I could do that. You can loop me in a time loop, just doing that stuff forever, and I would not be like. There's so many ways to crack a story. There's so many ways to take things. There's so many different approaches. You can give someone the same script, or the same concept. Like you can give 10 people the same concept, and they'll write 10 completely different stories. And I loved that because like that was like. Cracking the story was such a tough puzzle, and that's really what I enjoyed. So there's a lot more that goes into it, but for me, I thought the toughest part was like getting the story right, and all the notes with the story and all the like the politics involved. That was what was fun. Not the politics itself, but it's just like that's another challenge you have to work around because I think you can't have a story without that. You can't have a movie without that script.
Right.
And so like figuring out that script, that was fun to me. Obviously, I'm biased because I come from a screenwriting background.
See, like this is an interesting perspective for us because Amber's an actor, and I personally like cinematography and like camera work and stuff.
Yeah.
So we never really hear about this stuff, and I think that's really cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
You two love being on set. For me, I'm like, like what is this? You know, like. Yeah. I think the fun part about being on set too is like, I'll use the biggest example ever, like The Force Awakens, when we were seeing all these featurettes before the movie came out. You're like, oh my gosh, I would love to be on that set. But the actuality of being on that set in that desert, sand get into the camera, y'all got to figure that out.
Oh, the overheating! I can already see it.
Working 16 hours.
Oh my God.
And you might not be the principal, so you're probably a PA a lot of the time, just 16 hours.
And you're just running, or you're just waiting there, and then you go and do your thing, and then
you're
you wait
sitting
another
in
5 hours.
air-conditioned room reading these scripts.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm sitting there in a nice room, like what do you think of this scene? Like, that's what I like. You know,
awesome.
and we're just eating, even though they weren't paying me. But you know, we get the lunch, we're nibbling our food. I'm like, oh yeah,
that's a consolation.
That's a good scene. Yeah, like I love that. But that's just how I work. Like, so I'm biased towards that. Yeah.
Like, it's so interesting hearing, again, as Jasmine said, that side of it, because we've gotten a lot of filmmakers that are, you know, either they're just starting to get into the industry or they're still very hands-on, like filmmaking. And we were trying to venture more into kind of like the development stages, the business of these arts industries. So that's really
Really?
interesting to
Oh,
hear.
you
Yeah.
gotta talk
found
to
the right
That's our
guy,
next.
huh?
That's our, because
that's
you
all
know,
USC.
a lot of the positions, you know, in frac that are employable come from those niche areas where not
Yeah.
a lot of people know about them. So,
Exactly.
so in you know, from that, maybe we can talk a little bit more about your pivot, I guess, between film to business. Because I know when we were talking, you were able to share a lot about kind of the realities of what you faced.
Yeah.
So what was that pivot like? What started it, and kind of how did that whole thing go?
Yeah. I always give the I always tell the brief story of like the real beginning of it was I took this TV class, the professor named Nathan Govel, and I really appreciate him because he was very like analytical. And I think coming up as an like a more creative person, so I wasn't really good at math or anything like that when I was growing up in like grade school and so forth. So I always thought that I was literally dumb. Oh, I can't do anything
Oh, we
with
can
numbers.
relate.
Yeah,
Right,
no, but you
right,
can't.
right, right.
Like it ain't that deep. It ain't that deep. That's what I learned. But
Yeah.
my teachers made it feel that deep. But anyways, like again, being self-taught, like I remember I'd heard about Netflix cord cutting, and then he had this class, our intro to TV, where he broke down the numbers, and like I was just shook. I'm like, oh, it's that bad? Like I knew it was bad, but like it's that bad.
Elaborate.
Okay, so like it's one. I don't have the stats off like these are stats are several years old, but like imagine someone telling you that like per quarter. I wouldn't understand that at the time. Now I think in quarters, but like he would say basically every 3 months, X million people leave cable TV and subscribe to Netflix, like direct, like and put you know what I mean, like put in that number in perspective. I was like, yo, it's that bad. Like I I knew people weren't watching TV, but no one had ever quantified it for me.
Right.
And that's when I was like, damn, like I became addicted to statistics. But I went up to him after and I said, hey, thank you, because like that was a really good lecture, because he made me understand that side of it. And then I started thinking about my own behavior, and I started realizing I watch more. I'm in film school, but outside of the films USC provides, like, oh, this movie's coming out, Jasmine's movie's coming out, so let sign up, and then you go watch a screener of it before it comes out and all that. Like outside of that, I wasn't watching any movies on my own anymore. I watched a lot of movies to get into the school, but then I got in and something changed. I was watching. I realized like, oh, I'm watching more TV. No, I'm watching more YouTube than I am watching actual
Right.
movies on my free time. Like in class, I'm
Right.
forced to watch movies, and that's the thing. Like I looked up how many people are watching YouTube, and 50% of all people on the internet were watching YouTube every single day. How do you compete with that? That's what the box office numbers were showing you. At the time, TikTok wasn't a thing. How do you competing with like? Let me back up. I started realizing slowly that like, okay, this industry is measuring people off of, and this is like a slow burn. It wasn't like I just woke up one day. Like it was slow for me to realize it. But like this industry is measuring, historically measures, like the box office, right? But now, it's just a measure of attention, and that attention historically has been Netflix's. How many people are watching Netflix? No, 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 no. It's not about that anymore. Like it's like what is taking people's attention in general, because someone's going to dedicate an hour of their time to listen to this podcast. That's 1 hour they're not watching Netflix. That's 1 hour they're not watching Disney Plus, right? But like back then, it was just, oh, that's the 1 hour they're not watching TV. 1 hour they're not going to theater. That's the 1 hour they're not watching Netflix, which was the predominant player at the time. But like you have to think about that. Like at the time, I didn't even know about Twitch and how many people watch other people play video games. I know about just how many people were playing video games in general. Like the games changed, I think, and I think as a film school, it's frustrating to get people to realize that, because now it's commonplace. Everybody sees this. My thing was a lot of people were associating like quality with like and storytelling with film, just film. But no, you can tell a story. You can tell a story through video games. You can tell stories on TikTok if you want to. You can tell stories anywhere. On top of that, as streamers got bigger and bigger, you were seeing these smaller. You were seeing people like something like Sundance now, whereas like YouTube can make a film and show up at Sundance. Now it's turned into a case where, because there's a streaming war going on, it's like bigger producers are showing up there just to get their content bought. So now, like newcomers being like priced out or just edged out of like, not priced out, but like there's like the opportunity just isn't there because more experienced people are showing up at a entry level festival where historically most people would discover. I just started realizing this stuff while I was in it. I just started thinking about it more and more. I'm like, oh, like the game's changing. Why? Like, why am I watching so much YouTube? Why? Like, and how come? I remember there was this one girl that said, this one woman who was in like 2 classes below me, and she was like, oh, I don't watch movies. And I was like, what do you mean you don't watch movies? Like, how? Like, what do you do? She's like, I don't know. I listen to music. I go on Instagram. I'm like, what? Like, how can you not watch me? She's like, I just don't have the time. Like, no, like you have to make the time. What are you talking about, bro? Like, but I now understand. Like, what I was understanding that the content she's consuming on Instagram is enough for her. It might not be high quality or whatever you want to call it, but it's like for her, it's about attention now.
Right.
It's about it's like, where are you spending your attention? It doesn't have to be sitting there in a theater watching a movie. Like where are you spending your attention? And that's when I realized, like, okay, that doesn't necessarily have to be with just film. Like, you don't have to, like, the industry's getting harder and harder. This isn't discouraging anyone, but like, it's getting harder and harder, just as there's more and more opportunities, like, to break in.
Right.
If that makes sense. Like, so there's this person who made a commercial for there's this person that made a commercial for like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but like a serious take.
Right.
And it got picked up. Like, you think that person get like this? There are so many people making films trying to apply to Sundance, and they're competing against George Clooney and like all these other people that are like just trying to get their shit bought at Netflix. I mean, from Netflix or Apple, that are also competing against like Sundance. I think Miss Americana, a Netflix movie about what's her name?
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift premiered at like Sundance, I think.
Right.
Like, you're competing against Netflix and Taylor Swift, and you're a newcomer.
Right.
So it's like, where's the new Sundance? I mean, that's a great opportunity for someone to create the new Sundance, the new real entry level. But something I realized, like, I'm not the one to, like, I don't have the financial back-end to be the one to take those risks, if that makes any sense. Like at the time, my mom had cancer. At the time, like, I want to help my mom and like my family like help because my dad was the primary caretaker, so he's not working as much. So I want to like help with money. And like at that time, I was getting $16 from Disney. Like, that's, and I have student loans coming in like a couple months. So it's like, for me, it didn't make sense. Like, he had that quote, like, what happens if you don't make it? What happens? And that's the thing. It's like what everybody needs to realize is that like, and you'll see this a lot once y'all start college. There's 2 ways. Like you see a lot of people. This isn't the first way, but you'll see a lot of people come through your film school or whatever program you're in. They'll be like, yeah, I just called up George Lucas. That's how I got that job. At Matt Wood. Shout out to Matt Wood, by the way. He's General Grievous. Like, he literally called George Lucas. And like, I'm like, man, try calling Lucasfilm now for a job. It's so like the games change. All these people, like, the way the sort of like romanticization I had about the film industry, like coming up and like, oh yeah, just making these films, like that wasn't a different. It was hard to accept that, but that was a different context of time. Like, before you can make that small indie film, and you can do that now. It's shifting to streaming, so they quantify it. But like, the game's just changing from under you. Like, people giving you advice, that advice doesn't apply to you anymore. Like, it sounds horrible. Like, there were people coming in and people would ask, oh, how can I be like you? And the story they would tell, I'm like, yo, the game's changed, bro. Like, we can't apply what you're saying anymore. Like, we have to figure out brand new rules. The thing was, okay, it comes down to this question for me. Am I willing to spend, like, I think I have a lot of potential, but is that potential going to be cultivated in the film industry? Probably not for me. And here's the thing, like, you can go into the industry, someone sees your talent and promotes you right away, and you're making a crap ton of money, whatever. But like, you can also be like some of my mentors who've been at someplace 10 years and they just look past you. I just wasn't comfortable rolling the dice because I don't have. That's one way. The other way is you can come from a wealthy family, and they can fund you long enough for you to like make that breakout hit. Like everybody talks about Ryan Coogler. Ryan Coogler spent the first semester or so at USC in the grad program sleeping in his car. Like, but I don't say that. It's like people hear, like people like love struggle Olympics, like, oh yeah, you gotta hustle, like no, like that's not a good thing. Like we should not be celebrating that. Like he had to do that, and like, am I willing to go that deep, like for the chance? Like that, I think, at least the way I see the playing field, I can go to YouTube, I can work my way into YouTube and do YouTube strategy, and break in that way. I was learning about finance and how like money works and understand the business side of things, and like I became very fascinated with like film financing and stuff like that. I can go down that route. I can just go down business in general. At the time I was graduating, for me, I just knew a lot about script coverage. But how do you quantify that? I gave notes on Paddington Bear. Is that worth a raise? I don't know. Like you can't quantify that. And so for me, I needed something that like, I have brought in this much revenue. I have brokered exactly. I've brokered this deal.
Right.
And I bet you any money I can go back in the film industry and get a better job now with all my experience.
Right.
Right. So I knew I'd catapult outside of the film. I'd grow outside of the film industry faster than I would within the film industry. I'm now a manager. I lead a team of 9, and I didn't even know I was capable of doing that. This isn't to be mean. I probably wouldn't have found that out within the film industry. I need to go find that out. I found that out elsewhere. I still apply. I'm not going to go into that, but I still apply like film aspects. Like the way I go about strategy with my role is very similar to the way I would start writing a screenplay. It's just like doing the research, analyzing everything. If that makes any sense. So like I think that's how you should approach your career. It's like finding what with the resource I have, what is the thing that's going to catapult me forward. And what is the thing that everybody else is ignoring that maybe I see that I can leverage to my advantage?
So much to unpack. Wow, my mind is blown.
No,
but
stop.
Listen, it's so, I don't know. It like excites me honestly to hear kind of somebody who's been in the film industry talking about like the new, or I guess like phase of content, because obviously I'm on YouTube, but I still sense almost like a way of people not taking this legitimately even to this day. I feel like it just seems like, because I guess lower barriers of entry, it just seems like it's something anybody could do. And so the things, even though the content can be really, really great, half the time it's not necessarily taken as seriously, and people are still trying to break into the mainstream media through whatever it is they're doing on these platforms. Why did it take so long for these production companies or just people in actual like traditional entertainment to recognize that this is a newer opportunity and to see this change happening? What is your take on that? Because I think it's interesting that you picked up on it before anybody else did, it seems.
Yeah, I that's a great question. Imagine like someone coming in and say like, oh, TikTok's going to be replaced, or Apple is going to be like, if someone said like Apple's going to be replaced within the next like 15 years, like you feel like Chicken Little if you ever seen that movie. Is like the sky's falling. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like it a lot of it's just like culture. It's this culture of like this. We've been doing this for a while this way. Like, why would anything else displace us? Right. And it's like, I mean, think about like the Weinstein scandal and like how many people knew but like didn't. Even if you remove the accountability aspect of like of the fear, like I can't, I'm seeing it but I'm afraid I'll get fired, so I'm not going to say anything. It's just like a lot of people's attitudes. Oh, it's just how it is. He does that, like, and like, people harass people like within this industry. It's just something. It's just what it is. What it is. Like that's the mindset a lot of time. It's like asking why do we do. A lot of companies will go, it's just how it's done. I remember Netflix saying they're trying to be. You can go find this article. Netflix said they're trying to be HBO fast, and HBO can be them. And HBO laughed at them. So it's like, that's just like, how you TikTok.
Instagram?
So it's like, yeah, exactly. It's like how? Until it happens. And when it happens, it's damn near a little too late. So you always have to be on the move to find what's next. The answer to your question is change is hard. People are afraid of change. And like for me, I don't have anything. For me, it's easy to like talk about like, oh, this is going on and this is that, blah blah blah, because like I don't have anything invested. I don't have millions of dollars riding on like my company. Like, I don't have that.
Right. Well, speaking of change, one last question before we get
No,
to
ask whatever.
advice. I
Yeah.
want to hear about kind of the transition from film to business, because you were so involved interning, working for these media companies. And I think the switch to business, like I said before, just that idea, like change is scary and the idea
Yeah.
of it is very daunting. How was that for you? How did you, I feel like you're just very strategic in all senses in terms of everything you do. How did you kind of prep yourself for that change to make it as smooth as possible? And how did you know kind of where to go if you never studied business and you were never really that experienced in that industry to begin with? How did you make that easier for you? Or was it easy at all? Did you have to go through things that you wish you had known before?
It wasn't easy. I was preparing when I got the job at Disney. I did have some foresight, and before I graduated, I straight up asked my friend. I asked him like, Alex, do you think I'd be a good assistant? He goes, no, like you'd be a horrible assistant. I'm like, yeah, I think so too, because like I'm just too interested. I'm always like want to study something or like know what's going on, and it'd be tough for me to just like focus on someone's life.
Or to just stay at that level and not really kind of want something further.
Exactly. What I did at that time was I dropped my French class, which made me financially eligible with my financial aid package to come back one last semester, and I used that summer. That's how I worked at Novaland. I used that summer to find a job that was tangible. I wanted by the end of the summer to say, I have done this. I was a talent manager, so I think that was the year Fortnite came out, and I was managing the Mixer, YouTube, and Twitch streamers play video games, and I would manage their careers for like a summer. I would sign them, I'd find them, all that. And by the end of that, I had brought in 90K. So an ad revenue, not for myself. She only paid me 2K. But anyways, but I had brought in 90K in ad revenue just from managing those people, and I thought, damn, like that's, I can say I did that. And that's when I applied to Disney, and the recruiter told me I was the only one with new media experience when I applied at that time. Everybody else was some kind of development. I was the only one that was coming and talking about some video games. And that was my plan initially. So I go in there, and that's a story for another time. But it starts off great. But I start like my manager starts giving me a hard time and all that, and I hate going into work. And I start plotting. I start plotting to find something new. And I knew I wanted to go into business. I'd learned about investing because that money I made from Novaland, I'd invested it. And it was growing. I was like, wow, this is so cool. I want to do that. Yeah. For someone who doesn't come for money, I'm like, wow. And so I would literally have flashcards with investing, and on my train ride, I'd be like reviewing the flashcards, and then so that's what I would do on my own, just to learn the same kind of mindset I had with learning screenwriting. I would have with like learning finance. And the thing there was, I was strategizing about what job I could get within Disney that wasn't directly film. And as in like I'm not on sets every day. I'm just like analyzing, doing strategy, that kind of stuff. That being said, I also looked at a lot of the more successful people that I want to emulate, and they didn't start off in film, if that makes sense. Like if you look at Jason Blum, he is a finance person who ends up funding, who takes his money and ends up funding Blumhouse. Right. There you go. Right. You look at the three partners that started A24. They came from a film distribution, like film finance and distribution background, and then they took that. All these people, if you think about the way George Lucas thinks about stories, like he's a businessman first. Like Walt Disney had a business plan, and like, oh, you're gonna go to the the plant, you're gonna go to Walt Disney, and then you're gonna hear the music from the movies, then you're gonna watch the movies, and if you watch the movies, then you want to go back to like that. That's a plan. That's a business. That's like strategy, and that's what I want to figure out. So as I was trying to figure that out, my supervisor fired me from Disney. Story for another time. And so I had about like 2 or 3K saved up as an emergency fund, and it was hard for like 6 months or so. Like I did Uber just to survive, and like that's its own story. So I don't want to sugarcoat it. Like it was tough.
Right.
I cried a lot. I questioned myself a lot. But when you just got to survive, you'll do what you got to do. So I just did Uber for a little bit. But when I wasn't doing Uber, when I didn't own a car, I would use this company called Animo and pay them per mile to use their car. So every time I'm driving and I'm not getting a ride, I'm burning my own money. Like, so because I'm paying per mile, right? So it's like, I went through it.
Respect.
But like, the point is, I'm not saying that it's a tough time. The point is, when I wasn't doing Uber, when I'd go home, I would look at the many stages of a startup. And what I would do is I would look at like, okay, like say y'all start a company. I'm like, when do you bring HR in? When do you bring marketing in? When do you bring this role in? When do you bring sales in? And I would read the title of every role they would bring in at what point. And I found this role called business development. And that role aligned very closely with what I learned in film school. So I knew I could finesse like a job interview in business development. Exactly. There you go. Transferable skills. So I looked for what role had the most transferable skills with me, and then I sought jobs in business development, and I filled a couple interviews, and it was just even tough to get an interview. And then one day, a woman named Kendra Craven sat in my Uber, and she was working at a firm that needed business development reps, and that's how I'm working at that company right now. I'm a manager.
Oh my gosh. Well, that was so interesting. Like, I love hearing the business side of it. So that was fantastic. But I guess to end off the episode, one of the things we always ask our guests is a piece of advice. Basically something that, like, you know, a sentence, a phrase, something that you think would resonate with youth artists, up and coming artists who are struggling to kind of find their path, or maybe have worries about the future, or maybe something that you learned from your own experience that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I wish I had like a neat way to tie it all up in terms of like a quote or anything. I should have prepared that. But in the end, it's like just be analytical. It's like, so for example, like if you're an actor 7-8 years ago, you rely on residuals a lot. That's not a big game now, because like now Netflix or Apple, they'll just buy your movie outright, and it's not playing on TV as much. So you're not getting that check coming in from reruns on Nick at Night or whatever like that. Like keep your ear to the ground and like analyze what's actually going on, and like use what resources you have, because like you just have to like whatever trend that comes through, like as in like a new TikTok comes through, don't be afraid to like put yourself out there, because like you're the one paying your rent. Like if you're afraid of your high school friends or your parents judging, like no, like you're the one in charge of your own destiny. Like there will never be another person ever like you. Even if someone like cloned you, they'll never be born in that context of time, so they won't see the same sequence of events as you saw. So it's like you're really like a unique being, and you need to understand to like just be analytical and pay attention to like what's going on, because like a lot of companies, people live and die by that, you know. So it's like if you're an actor, like keep like I'll get this one job that'll pay me for a little bit for the next one. That stuff doesn't exist as much anymore, unless you're talking commercials that can pay you for a little while between work. So just be mindful, understand your situation, and listen to yourself, like however you're feeling. If you're not in the headspace to do something right now, don't force it. Like take your time. Right. And like, so in the end, like my thing is just be analytical, because like I always believe in catapulting. It's like, oh, it may look like I'm taking a few steps back, but like what I'm doing is going to catapult me ahead of you by several years. And like always like analyze what's going to catapult you to like your next step based on the resources you have.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Kojo,
No.
a million thanks. There are no words to say how thankful we are. You know how much we love you. It's
I love
so
y'all too.
awesome chatting with you again after so long and hearing everything. And, you know, hopefully, I'm sure a lot of what you said has resonated with a lot of people. It's a really, really different take than what we've had. And I think a lot of people are going to be grateful for that. Exactly. We're personally very grateful for that.
Yeah.
So with that being said, thank you so much, everyone, for watching and listening to this episode. We will see you guys next month, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.